Imagine you stood on a riverbank and the river in front of you is flowing past, and they're your emotions. And occasionally life will come along and it will nudge you in. But that's okay, because we get ourselves out of the river, we dry ourselves off, and we just go about our life. Well, the question I'm most often asked is, well, what can business leaders learn from the world of hostage negotiation? And the principles are pretty much identical when you think about it, whether or not you want to try and secure the release of hostages or persuade a potential customer, client, or colleague. Because I didn't have direct authority over the kidnappers or the family of the hostage or the company I was supporting. That's the same, nor do business leaders have direct authority over their customers or clients. And the best leaders that I've certainly worked with don't rely on their authority, their job title or position to get things done. And the thing I really took away from, 300 or so cases was we're emotional creatures. In fact, we're feeling creatures that think, not thinking creatures that feel. And so we make decisions emotionally, regardless of the circumstances, and then we look to justify them rationally afterwards. And there's really three elements to that apply when I'm negotiating with kidnappers or I'm trying to get a business deal across the line. First one is emotion, as I said. We need to be able to uncover the emotional reasons here. Secondly, we need to address and deal with the logical reasons that is going to get somebody to say yes and mean it. And then when we dealt with the emotions, dealt with the logic, we then need to kind of uncover the fear. What do they fear the most here of losing, perhaps? Is it, in a business context, is it a bit of FOMO, a bit of scarcity, for example? But above all, as leaders and as negotiators, we really need to be able to master this inner game, first of all, to get ourselves in the best possible place so we don't become emotionally dysregulated, because the number one skill of the world's best negotiators, and indeed in my experience, business leaders, is this ability to emotionally self-regulate. So we need to master that ourselves. We then need to take the time to understand the world of our customer, our client, indeed, as I did with the kidnappers as well. Because really, we never really negotiate about price or about terms and conditions or timelines. What we really negotiate under the surface are things like identity and status. And somebody's only going to say yes if we're going to increase or at least not diminish somebody's identity and status as to how they see themselves in the world. I think emotions get in the way of negotiations, and they fail because people allow themselves to become emotionally hijacked. This is when the amygdala, that tiny part of the brain, gets activated and our hot buttons get pressed. And when that happens, it can make intelligent people say and do stupid things. And I can't be the only person to have sent the text message or the email or made the comment in that moment and immediately afterwards thinking, why did I say that? Or why did I press send? And so we need to be able to understand that emotional hijack is inevitable. It's a biological response. It's the cortisol, the adrenaline that kicks in. But again, what we really need to do and manage here is to be able to train ourselves to buy just 1 second, give ourselves 1 second, buy ourselves time from that stimulus, that trigger, and how we respond. We need to be able to control that gap. And so the analogy I like to give for people to really understand this concept is to imagine you stood on a riverbank and the river in front of you is flowing past, and they're your emotions. And occasionally life will come along and it will nudge you in. But that's okay, because we get ourselves out of the river, we dry ourselves off, and we just go about our life. But occasionally what happens? We get nudged in, and then we go for a swim, and we go out to sea, and we end up drowning in this sea of overwhelm and stress and high emotional dysregulation. And so what we need to be able to train ourselves is to observe, but not absorb. We need to be able to be aware of and move towards these hot buttons and our emotions, and to feel the feeling, but drop the story, essentially. We don't want to get carried away down that river. And if we can just buy ourselves that 1 second to get ahead and then choose our response mindfully and deliberately rather than some emotive knee-jerk reaction. Because when we don't do that, what happens is it becomes a win-lose battle. And I've seen this before with clients where suddenly red lines get drawn up and there's non-negotiables, and people will walk away and lose deals for the slightest and what looks like the most minor of reasons, which is why we really need to get a grip of those emotions of ourselves and indeed of the people we're looking to influence and persuade and get a deal with. So it doesn't matter whether or not you're in a boardroom or indeed a crisis, whatever it looks like for you. It's absolutely essential to build trust and build it quickly. And trust is the golden thread through every single successful negotiation that you'll have. And in a kidnapping case, for example, trust was the foundation on which it was all built, which is why there was a 93% chance of the hostages coming back as a direct result of the negotiation. Not 100%, and anyone who gives you 100% odds on anything, I would stay well clear, but 93% in the most unregulated, ungoverned, dangerous industry in the world. And the reason why it works over multiple decades is that we spend an inordinate amount of time to building trust. And ultimately what this comes down to is trust is you following through with what you say you're going to do. So in my previous life as a kidnap negotiator, if I said I was going to be available to speak to the kidnappers between 2 and 4 o'clock every afternoon, I needed to make sure. And if I promised I was going to come up with another increased offer to the money they were looking for, I would do that. But equally, they needed to demonstrate that too. So if they said they were going to provide a proof of live call that the hostages were okay and being well looked after, on the next phone call, they needed to follow through with that. And that ultimately that works to the end of that particular negotiation, where I end up handing money over in the middle of a jungle or at sea or wherever it is. I need to trust that the kidnappers are going to release the hostages safe. They're going to take the money and let the hostages go rather than keeping both. And so there's so many things at stake there. And ultimately, somebody will only trust you regardless of the situation, whether or not it's kidnappers, business, or even with your kids, is they'll be asking themselves, does this person have my best interests at heart? And going back to that question, that topic of identity and status I mentioned earlier, they'll be asking themselves, is saying yes to this person going to increase or at least not diminish how I see myself in the world? How other people are going to perceive me by saying yes? And finally, on the topic of trust, people need to see trust as a two-sided coin. To be trusted, you first need to be trusting. And it's interesting how we set the bar for other people to trust us really low. Well, of course you should trust me because it's me and I'm really trustworthy. But where do we set the bar in terms of trusting other people? We set it really high. Well, you need to prove it to me that I can trust you first. And so we as leaders, we need to go first and be trusting if we want to be trusted. I guess in my experience, the biggest misconception around that influence and persuasion really is they don't see it as a collaboration or cooperation. It's everyone's life needs to be better as a direct result of engaging with you. If it's not, it's like, well, what's the point? Okay, so whether as an individual or as a business, people need to feel as if this is a collaboration. I'm alongside the customer or the client, as opposed to it's being done to me, or it's a win-lose. And if we can, rather than trying to expand the size of the slice of a fixed size pie, we actually look to try and expand the size of the pie as a whole. And so, regardless of if it's everyday or high risk business or crisis situations, influence and persuasion comes down to people feeling as if this is a collaboration. I'm cooperating with, as opposed to it being done to you. I hope people walk away from my talks and my speeches as understanding that negotiation or negotiating well and influencing others is a meta life skill. And it's simple but not easy. And if you follow some proven steps within a framework that has been tested and forged in serious, in fact, let me answer that question again, actually. Okay, so ask me the question again.
Okay. What do you hope audiences will take away from your public speeches?
I hope people take away from my speeches is an understanding that to be able to negotiate well and to influence others is a meta life skill. It's applicable to all areas of our life, but it's simple yet not easy. And I think if you follow proven steps that have been forged and tested when the stakes can't get any higher, it's going to stand you in really great stead for when those challenging conversations and difficult people come into your life that you need to navigate and overcome and ultimately succeed, whatever it is your goal, whether personally or professionally.
Fantastic. So before I stop the recording, was there anything you wanted to either add or go again at, or are you happy with everything?
I'll just add like a second part to that last question, probably. And I'll just say that success in business and life comes down to the quality of your conversations. And negotiation is simply a conversation with a purpose. And all of us, regardless of our circumstances or situation, are having these conversations all day, every day.